The mystery in the language. Why does Japanese sound so different from Chinese, Korean, or anything else in the world? The language is fluid, soft, and full of subtle rhythm. It blends sounds like su, ryo, and sha with a precision that feels like poetry, even in daily speech. It has 3 writing systems, layers of politeness, and words that don't exist in any other language, like komorebi, the sunlight that filters through trees. But where did it come from? Unlike Latin, which gave birth to French, Spanish, and Italian, or Arabic, which spread with Islam across continents, Japanese seems to stand alone. Its roots are ancient, its journey complex, mysterious, and beautifully human. This is not just the story of a language, it's the story of how a nation found its voice, shaped by nature, war, migration, and poetry. And while most languages simplify over time, Japanese embraced complexity. Even today, school children must learn over 2,000 kanji just to be literate. So how did this happen? To answer that, we'll travel back in time, to the mist-covered islands of the Jōmon and Yayoi people, to Buddhist monks carrying scrolls, to noblewomen painting poems in whispered kana, to the samurai shaping status with a single verb. We'll explore how Japan absorbed Chinese writing, then reshaped it, how it created Hiragana and Katakana, writing systems no other culture uses in this way, how dialects formed in remote villages, and how language became a tool of rank, identity, and survival, from emperors to farmers, from courtiers to couriers. The Japanese language has passed silently through mouths for over 2,000 years. Now, we're going to uncover its voice. This is Japan Rewind, and this is the true story of how the Japanese language was born and why it's so unique. Before language, Jōmon, Yayoi, and the pre-writing world. The earliest known culture in Japan, the Jōmon, dates back to around 14,000 BCE, one of the world's oldest pottery-producing societies. We don't know what language they spoke. They left no writing. But many scholars believe they passed knowledge through oral tradition, songs, rituals, and spoken stories. Around 300 BCE, new people began to arrive. The Yayoi, bringing rice farming, metallurgy, and likely a new wave of speech. Linguists believe that the roots of the Proto-Japanese language, the early ancestor of modern Japanese, may have come with these migrations, possibly from the Korean peninsula. Place names, burial customs, and core vocabulary offer clues. Simple words like hand, water, and tree appear across ancient dialects, suggesting a shared origin. Meanwhile, in the north, the Ainu people spoke a completely different language, unrelated to Japanese or Chinese. The survival of Ainu into modern times offers hints of a deeper linguistic layering across the islands. Still, for thousands of years, there was no script. Language lived in memory, and speaking itself was a sacred act, a way to pass life forward without ink or page. But that would change dramatically in the centuries to come, when symbols arrived from a powerful foreign empire. The arrival of writing, Kanji enters Japan. In the 5th and 6th centuries CE, something revolutionary arrived in Japan, writing. It came from the mainland, through Korean kingdoms like Baekje, who served as cultural intermediaries. Buddhist monks, scribes, and scholars crossed the sea carrying Chinese texts written in kanji, complex logograms packed with layers of meaning. For Japan, this was a breakthrough. Laws, prayers, and histories could finally be written down. But there was a problem. Chinese and Japanese are completely different languages. Chinese is tonal, concise, and built from monosyllables. Japanese is agglutinative. Its grammar stacks particles and verbs in long, flexible strings. To make it work, Japanese scholars created a system called kanbun, marking up Chinese texts with guides to read them in Japanese order. It was like reverse engineering meaning. This was mostly limited to the elite. Only court officials, Buddhist monks, and aristocrats had the training to read or write this way. Still, the impact was enormous. Chinese vocabulary entered Japanese rapidly. Words like tenno, emperor, bungaku, literature, and kyoiku, education, all came from Chinese. Today, it's estimated that over 50% of Japanese vocabulary is derived from Chinese origin compounds. But kanji alone couldn't express everything. It wasn't suited to Japanese grammar, particles, or spoken style. Japan needed something else, a system that could match the sound of its own voice. And that's when Japan created something no other culture in Asia had done. Hiragana and Katakana, Japan writes its own voice. Kanji gave Japan written power, but not personal voice. By the 8th and 9th centuries, Japanese scholars began using kanji phonetically, not for meaning, but for sound. Out of this came two new writing systems, Hiragana and Katakana. Hiragana is soft, flowing, and curved, originally used by women in the imperial court who were often excluded from classical Chinese education. They used hiragana to write poetry, diaries, and love letters in native Japanese. The most famous of these women was Murasaki Shikibu, author of The Tale of Genji, often called the world's first novel. She wrote primarily in hiragana, giving the language elegance, emotion, and depth. Meanwhile, katakana was developed by Buddhist monks. It's angular, clipped, and practical, used to annotate Chinese texts for pronunciation and meaning. Over time, the two scripts found their roles. Hiragana, native grammar, particles, poetry. Katakana, foreign words, emphasis, sound effects. Kanji, core nouns, roots of verbs, layered meaning. This triple script system still defines written Japanese today, and it's unique in the world. No other modern language uses three separate systems simultaneously. These new scripts gave voice to everyday speech. They brought language to life, not as a tool of the elite, but as a reflection of the people. For the first time, Japan wasn't just writing, it was writing itself. The samurai voice, rank, power, and politeness. As Japan shifted into the medieval period, a new class emerged to dominate the land, the samurai. And with them came a new way of speaking, one built around power, discipline, and hierarchy. In samurai culture, language was never casual. It was a signal of who you were, who you outranked, and who you served. This gave rise to one of the most distinctive features of Japanese, keigo, or honorific speech. Keigo has 3 levels. Sonkeigo, respectful language, for speaking about others in high status. Kenjogo, humble language, to lower oneself when speaking. Teinego, polite neutral language, for everyday formality. Even today, Japanese speakers constantly switch between these levels, depending on who they're talking to. It's not just politeness, it's survival language, developed in a time when misspeaking could cost you your head. Common verbs had different forms depending on status. To eat, for example, tabaru, neutral, meshiagaru, respectful, itadaku, humble. The samurai learned not just martial arts, but verbal precision. Language was part of their armor, and the influence spread. Merchants began using keigo to address clients. Artisans used it with samurai patrons. Even peasants had their own adapted speech for dealing with authority. Japanese became more than a language. It became a social map, where every sentence revealed your place. And that map still shapes how Japanese is spoken today. Commoners, dialects, and isolation. While samurai and nobles shaped formal speech, most of Japan's population, farmers, craftsmen, villagers, spoke in ways never recorded. And because Japan is so mountainous, separated by rivers and islands, these local languages evolved into something unique: Hogan, or regional dialects. Dialects weren't just accents, they were almost different languages. For example, Kansai-ben, Osaka, Kyoto, playful, rhythmic, expressive. Tohoku-ben, slow, nasal, often hard to follow. Kagoshima-ben, famously hard to understand, even for other Japanese. Okinawan languages, part of the Ryukyuan language family, distinct from Japanese entirely. In the Edo period, travel was tightly restricted under the Sakoku, national isolation policy. People rarely left their region. This deepened the differences between dialects. Even short distances, just 50 kilometers, could mean completely different words, rhythms, and grammar. Peasants, merchants, monks, all spoke their own local form of Japanese, and only the educated elite could read and write standard forms. Still, literacy began to spread. Terakoya, small, temple-run schools, taught boys and sometimes girls how to read kana, count with the soroban, abacus, and write simple phrases. But spoken language remained local. It was shaped by farming, fishing, weather, gods, and gossip. There was no national standard, no correct Japanese, just voices from the mountains, the islands, and the fields. And though the Meiji government would later push for standardization, those local voices never disappeared. Even today, dialects are a living link to Japan's past, a language of layers, why it's still so complex. Today, most modern languages tend to simplify over time, but Japanese went the other way. It kept all three writing systems, Kanji, Hiragana, and Katakana. It preserved social hierarchy and grammar. It absorbed new words from the outside world and redefined them in its own way. Japanese writing is layered and visual. In a single sentence, you might see kanji for core ideas, hiragana for grammar, particles, and native words, katakana for emphasis or borrowed foreign terms. Even the verb to do, suru, changes depending on what you're doing, in business, sports, or slang. There are thousands of homophones, words that sound the same but mean totally different things depending on context and kanji. Like kami, which can mean paper, hair, or god. Layered meaning, layered history. Japanese also borrows constantly. From Portuguese came pan, bread. From Dutch, garasu, glass. From English, arubaito, part-time job. Pasakon, personal computer, anime. These words are written in katakana, the script for foreign influence, always distinct from native Japanese. But even with all this change, the core structure remains. Children still learn kana in early school. They memorize 2,000 plus kanji just to pass high school. They switch speech styles depending on status, almost unconsciously. And in every moment, history's at work. Japanese is not just a language. It's a memory system, a cultural archive you speak aloud. It's complex, yes, but it's also poetic, efficient, and deeply rooted. Every sentence carries ancestry. Every word is a link in a chain, stretching back 2,000 years. A voice that endured. So where did the Japanese language come from? It came from Jōmon whispers in the forest, from Yayoi farmers singing to their rice, from Korean scribes, Chinese characters, and Buddhist chants. It grew in the shadows of temples, blossomed in the hands of noblewomen, and sharpened on the tongues of warriors. It adapted to foreign systems, then made them its own. It carried memory through isolation, and it still lives in every sentence spoken today. Language is more than sound. It's identity, and Japanese has kept that identity intact through invasions, modernization, and global change. It is one of the last major languages to use logograms alongside phonetic alphabets. It didn't simplify. It refused to forget. Every konnichiwa, Every kanji, every bow, is the echo of 2,000 years of cultural memory. So the next time you hear Japanese, whether in a classroom, a temple, a Tokyo train, or an anime clip, remember you are hearing the voice of a people who refuse to be silenced, who carved their identity into sound, and who carry their history in every syllable they speak. If this journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Japan Rewind. Let us know in the comments what surprised you most, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode where history speaks softly and powerfully.